All right, guys, got an awesome little classic throwback video here for you. This is back when MSNBC had some substantive conversation on the air. So we have Dylan Ratigan, Glenn Greenwald, Cenk Uygur. This is from a million years ago. This was about the 2010 elections. It's over a decade ago. And this conversation might just blow your minds for those of you who have never seen this. So let's watch.
Young Turk is with us along with Salon.com's Glenn Greenwald. He is the definition of firebrand. How much longer can it be taken? How much longer can people with an agenda like...
So context here, the Democrats just got routed in the midterms. This was the Tea Party wave of 2010. So Obama gets in there, 2008. There's a period where he has a supermajority. They don't do much with that supermajority. They get a right-wing health care plan through. That's Obamacare. The individual, excuse me, it's a type of system that keeps the for-profit health insurance companies in control. It's an individual mandate style system. So they demand that you go and pay for your health insurance on the private marketplace. There is some expansion of Medicaid under it as well. But it was originally a Heritage Foundation plan. So they didn't get much done. There was a giant backlash, and then now they're going to talk about that.
The sort of things that you advocate for, Cenk, that you advocate for, Glenn, continue to look to this political structure to do it and this president and this party to do it, Cenk?
At the end of the election, I said, that's it. I'm done. End of this, okay? Now, I was never really one of the guys who supported the White House for the sake of supporting the White House. In fact, I got a lot of heat for that, right?
I remember.
Because I challenged the government. And I think that's part of the job of the media. I know Glenn does as well. But after the elections, even if you were on that side, really? I mean, because you remember what they told us. Obama's a genius. I couldn't possibly understand his genius. He's playing three-dimensional chess. What part of three-dimensional chess do you give away your queen, your knight, your bishop, and the House of Representatives? No, they were wrong. We were right. It's time to fight.
Where's the leverage, Glenn?
Well, that's the issue, is there hasn't been any leverage, because you can complain and object to all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, politicians know that you're going to give them your undying and unconditional support because the other side is just mildly worse. What you're doing is you're ensuring that you will be ignored. But I think this election actually reveals some leverage, which is one of the reasons why the Democrats got destroyed, is because the base of the party, the people who put the Democrats in power in the last two elections, didn't bother to go and vote. And the reason they didn't bother and go and vote is because they weren't given a reason why they thought it was worthwhile.
Now, again, imagine with that supermajority, instead of doing Obamacare, imagine they did single-payer health care. Or even a public option. Imagine Obama with that supermajority raised the minimum wage. Or passed card check, pro-union legislation. If they did more with that supermajority, this trouncing wouldn't have happened. Definitely not to the degree that it did. Because, again, this was the Tea Party wave. It was a huge right-wing wave.
That is leverage. That's telling the Democrats you will be out of power, not just in the House of Representatives, but in the Senate and the White House if you continue on this path.
Let me add one other thing. Look, one thing I object to actually is that, you know, the idea that it's the far left or even the base.
You mean the characterization as the far left?
Right. Look at the country overwhelmingly agrees on certain things. One was the public option. Even a majority of Republicans in some polls were in favor of the public option because we know the health insurance companies are robbing us and we don't have a choice, so we all want a choice, right? Huge majorities for that. The White House ignores it. And then going after the banks. God, the whole country agreed with going after the banks and we didn't do it. So why didn't you do it? Does he not want?
So in other words, what did we get? We got bailouts. We got propping up Wall Street. When, you know, there was chatter at the time, hey, we should probably break up the banks.
Want the votes of a great majority of the country?
But I think that the answer to why he didn't do it is the obvious one, which is that 40% of all money for political functionality comes from banks.
An open discussion of the deep corruption within our system on MSNBC at the time. Wow. This type of talk wouldn't be allowed within miles of MSNBC in today's day and age. Incredible.
The next biggest contributor for all political functionality, all campaign money, comes from the healthcare insurance companies and insurance monopoly. We function.
Wow. Oh, man. Imagine MSNBC stayed like this, talking about real issues in detail.
We have, Glenn, a government that is not Democrats, Republicans, but that is 6 major industries that provide all of the capital, most of it coming from healthcare and finance, energy, defense, not far behind. And as a result, the politicians work to perpetuate those old interests. To your point, everybody would like to see more choice, more competition, but they don't get it because the politicians are more happy to work for those who write the checks at the expense of the balance of our country. Right. How much longer can it be gotten away with?
I mean, this is blowing me away, man. This is blowing me away. How good this conversation is. Oh, man.
You're right about that. The reason there are powerful factions in Washington is because they're powerful, which means that they have lots of leverage. They can threaten politicians and their ability to remain in power. And but the person who knows that best, the critique that you just articulated, is Barack Obama himself. His whole campaign was based upon subverting that very system, namely that no matter who wins, Democrats or Republicans, the same special interests continue to prosper while the ordinary Americans suffer. And the plan was that by assembling this highly energized, activated citizenry behind him, this army of people who believed in the change that he would bring, he could circumvent all of those power structures. He could tell them that they could no longer have their way because they couldn't do anything to him because he had this army of highly energized young voters, first-time voters, and the like, and they squandered that. Instead of becoming the voice of populist rage, they became the target of it.
Oh, that is so spot on. That's exactly what happened. He had the opportunity to go full FDR. And as we know with FDR, if you deliver for the American people, he got elected 4 times to the White House. 4 times. They came up with term limits because the Republicans were like, oh my God, we're never going to win again. These guys are too good. They delivered too much for the American people. He won 4 times, and he had like 80% of the House and 80% of the Senate at one point in his presidency. Obama could have delivered during the Great Recession. And then he would have gotten rewarded. The Democrats would have gotten rewarded. They didn't deliver. And then, like Glenn eloquently points out there, it's instead of being, they become the target of the populist rage instead of the people who channel the populist rage to get change.
Because they became the agents of the status quo rather than agents of change.
He took the words right out of my mouth. Boy, did they squander it. But let me add on it. Because his fundamental error was, we didn't ask you to do change on the specific issues. That's great. Healthcare reform, etc. That's lovely, okay? And there were some good wins and Pell Grants, etc., right? We asked you to change the system.
How it's done.
That's what you missed.
Done. How it's done.
How it's done.
If you look at the failure to change how it's done, and Glenn's argument that which is the only way to change how it's done is this massive coalition, engaged coalition outside of the political process with a charismatic leader in the White House that can combine and ultimately reform the process and the closed primary, the gerrymandering of all the districts. Supposedly it's a competitive election, and yet 75% of all the House seats were not up for grabs because of the gerrymandering. You're telling me it's a competitive election and only 25% of the seats are in play? You go down that list, if you look at the fundamental Obama failure, which was to have the engagement to become the president, to provide this coalition, and then abandon that engagement. And then you look instructively at a movie like The Social Network and the Mark Zuckerberg aspect, which is that if you choose engagement as a political or business philosophy, whatever it is, once I engage, you know this from the Young Turks where you publish constantly, you know this from the work that you do in Salon and all, and the whole way your business is set up is based on engagement, Glenn. Once you engage, you cannot disengage. The core to engagement is the decision to engage has to then become a constancy, or else you will have the level of betrayal that we now see here.
Well, that's the real tragedy of the Obama presidency, is there are millions of people who had believed that the political process had nothing to offer them, who were turned away from it, who were wallowing in cynicism, and they got convinced.
Oh, and oh boy, did that ramp up even more. How much more did that ramp up over the years? You had the Obama versus Romney election in 2012. Obama won. By the way, he ran a very, very populist and aggressive campaign in 2012. Go back and look at it. The ads were ridiculous. But then 2016 rolls around and we get Trump versus Hillary. Then we get Biden versus Trump. More and more as time goes by, that becomes even more true.
to put aside their cynicism for the first time ever, that there was really hope that they would be able to realize by investing themselves in the political process, and that has come crashing down. And I don't see how it can be re-engaged. And the irony of the Obama presidency, because people concluded that this, I thought, was the real chance that something would be made a difference. And if not,
by the way, so this on this point, Glenn turned out to be a little wrong, because Obama, again, the way he ran in 2012. Obama was a great campaigner. He wasn't good at governing, and he was a neoliberal corporatist. But in terms of how he postured when he ran, no, he would come across like a populist. Certainly did in 2012. He had these vicious ads going after Romney for outsourcing jobs, and he had the people who had their jobs outsourced in the commercials. There was one commercial where a guy talked about, we had to build the stage where management came to announce to us that we're now being laid off and our jobs are being shipped to China or wherever. And so Obama was able to tap back in to that, populist rage in 2012. But again, the way he governed, even after winning in 2012, was standard Obama. So Obama was able to recapture it, but not for the entire Democratic Party, just for him. And then again, he massively underdelivered once he got in office.
Even this worked, then I don't ever believe that anything will.
So let me agree with both of you guys, okay? Because, look, I'm with Glenn. There's a great irony here that the guy who sold us hope, it ultimately wound us robbing us of hope. And why? Because this was our one chance. Because the money power is so overwhelming.
Well, we got two more chances with Bernie Sanders, and let me stop talking before I start crying.
Such a hard thing to fight, but he had amassed the army to fight it. He had that army. Let's go. Let's do campaign finance reform. Let's change the way things are done so that the lobbyists,
gerrymandering.
right, so that the lobbyists don't own our politicians. And he squandered it. And so now what hope do we have? Now, to agree with you, Dylan, forget it. Forget Obama. Forget the Democrats. People say, oh, you don't support the Democrats enough. Hell yes, that's right, I don't, okay? And what I support is the people. That's why we do well online.
Yeah.
And you reach out to them and you say, forget it, we're going to build it on our own.
Right.
We're going to build it on our own. We don't need them.
Right.
Okay, we're going to do Obama without Obama.
Well, let me add one thing, Dylan, because I think this is really important. I guarantee you there are lots of people who are watching who are thinking, oh, look at how impatient they are. What did they think, that he was going to come in and fundamentally, radically change and improve Washington in 2 years? I don't think anybody thought that. I certainly didn't. I think everybody was in it for the long haul, was willing.
Well, I did. I did. When you have a supermajority, that is your chance. That is your chance, and that is what Obama had.
To have patience. The reason people are disappointed isn't because he hasn't succeeded yet. It's because he's not trying. He's doing the opposite. Everything he accomplishes is by meeting in secret with the very lobbyists who he said he was going to disempower.
And begging the Republicans for bipartisan agreement, which made every single piece of legislation way worse, and then they would vote against it anyway. Yeah.
Everything that he does is intended to entrench the system rather than subvert and undermine it. So if he were actually fighting, everybody, including everyone at this table, would have all the patience in the world. We're behind you. It's going to take a long time. You don't entrench powerful interests quickly. The disappointment is that he's not trying. He's doing the opposite.
I want to agree with what you were just saying. I completely agree with what you just said. But if you look back to 2008 and the stadiums that were full for Barack Obama with the hope that you were just referring to, the truth of the matter is Barack Obama didn't fill those stadiums. The people who just decided to believe filled those stadiums. And I think that your point is whether Barack Obama has disappointed or not, whether the GOP is going to do anything on the front of transparency, redistricting, primary reform, earmark transparency or not, I'll certainly encourage them to do so. The fact of the matter is that the people that want to see this happen, as evidenced by the following that you have achieved, the following that you have achieved, the number of people that appeared in that stadium around the president, the success of this TV program and other aspects of what we are doing, suggest that there's actually more energy to do this than ever before, and that we simply have not been able to identify the appropriate vehicle to get the necessary political leverage to actually make the reform happen. And yes, there's the disappointment in this president, because the thought was he was the leverage. The key, I think, is to find a way to re-engage and get the engagement between an agenda and the process. Speaking of the process, just because I want to irritate you guys a little bit more, and again, you don't get that worked up that easily, so I really
That's a problem.
Some fodder. Yeah, no, we need a little more expression out of the Turkish, our Turkish friend here. Of course, the material that I'm working with is the following. Jon Stewart who we all know and love, who's the resident comedian throwing tomatoes from the side. Met with Tim Geithner for 2 hours in an off-the-record meeting recently.
Well, John, whatever you tried didn't work. It definitely didn't work, looking back in hindsight.
Look at Tim Geithner's handling of the banks and the economy, the precipitous decline in investment and lending in this country, the distorted housing market, the constant money printing to cover up the ongoing extraction at the financial system, and Barack Obama's decision not only to keep that guy, but then to use that guy off the record to try to placate people like Jon Stewart. Does that basically confirm for you what Glenn was saying, Cenk, which is that he's not even trying?
That Obama's not trying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, if he was on the right path, I'd get all the patience in the world and I'd back him, because it's not a matter of being on Team Democrat or Team Republican. Are you headed in the right direction? For example, no campaign finance reform. No, they didn't even try. They didn't even propose it. It wasn't even on the board. They had a huge blackboard, and it didn't even make it on there. So now, and Tim Geithner is the worst example of that. Why did you hire the guy who gives the money, all the money to the banks? Why did you hire the guy who made all the mistakes? Why did you hire Rahm Emanuel? Why did you hire Larry Summers?
Right.
Now so forget it. Yeah. Let's go. If we rebuild it, they will come.
It will help us build some. We'll do a core values coalition. We'll do something real simple: transparency and competition and decision making. No more monopoly. No more gerrymandering. No more backroom deals. The three of us will get it. We'll probably get 80% of the country, one way or the other.
Well, what you need is the people realizing that the salvation, their solution, doesn't lie with unconditional support for either of the two parties. You have to find ways to pressure the party. The Tea Party did. I think what you're going to see is, as the president proceeds on his same path, he's already alienated so many of the core Democratic supporters and lots of other people as well. Going down that path will only alienate them more. And if this deficit commission results in cuts to Social Security, which all of Washington expects that it will, then you're going to see massive upheavals in terms of party alignment. And I think that will be a...
And by the way, everything they're talking about here, it did sort of manifest with the Bernie movement later on. You know, the angry... I was going to say angry leftists, but really it's just angry Americans who felt left behind by the system, and they know that the government's not looking out for them. And there was a giant wave, man. There was a giant wave.
A great opportunity.
No, they come to cut Social Security, and we are going to go to war. And not.
By the way, so let me tell you what happened right after this. They had the commission, and they did decide on doing cuts to Social Security. And what happened was the cuts that were proposed by Obama were viewed by the Tea Party as not big enough. And so then they blew up the entire deal. And as a result of that, we ended up having no cuts to Social Security. Because Obama put Social Security cuts on the table, and the Tea Partiers got in there, and they were like, no, we want more cuts to Social Security. And since they were such hardliners and so extreme and so wrong, they ended up blowing up the deal entirely, and we got no cuts to Social Security. But don't worry, so-called entitlement reform, which is just cutting, Social Security, Medicare, etc., that will be back on the table. Believe you me, especially in the, after this next election when Republicans gain more control. God help us all. As soon as Republicans get the presidency, the House, and the Senate, which at some point they will absolutely destroy entitlement programs, no doubt about it. But because the Tea Partiers were so extreme back in the time that we're watching here, they blew up any sort of deal. So it's almost like they were right for the wrong reasons. Their position was so insane, and they couldn't get all of it, so they blew up all of the cuts to it. Anyway, let's continue.
Just against the Republicans. We're going to go war against the Obama White House, okay? It's not going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not. They're going to try it, okay? He put 14 out of 18 of those guys on that commission are fiscal conservatives. They want to cut it, but we're not going to let them do it.
I believe you, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work with both of you. I admire both of your works. Cenk will be back a little later with a rant.
There you go. Man, MSNBC is nothing like that anymore. And it would have been interesting if they were able to stay this passionate, this intelligent, this detailed for all of this time. If they did that, then oh my God, the rating situation would be totally different. But of course, the advertisers would never allow this sort of truth to power to be spoken for an extended period of time.